3 Teslas. Gone. 20 feet of flame lit up the Virginia sky at precisely 6:17 a.m. It wasn't just smoke and fire, it was a message. No alarms. No warning. Just an explosion so violent it shattered the silence of a sleepy parking lot and ignited a chain reaction that would rip through the very core of American politics. What the news would later call a technical malfunction was anything but, because somewhere in a control room inside Tesla's central command center, that blast wasn't a question, it was an answer. And Elon Musk, sipping bitter coffee in a black jacket, watched it happen in grainy HD on loop over and over, silent, focused. Then he leaned in, eyes colder than steel. "Trace the funds," he said. "I want to know who paid for that device." And just like that, the hunt began. By the time the rest of the world was waking up to headlines like "Tesla battery fire raises questions," a small, rapidly assembled team of engineers and data analysts at Tesla had already uncovered something deeper, something darker, something no one was supposed to find. It started with a shadow, a blurry figure captured by an AI-optimized side camera. No license plate, no panic, no trace. Just calm, deliberate movement, a placement, a flicker. 20 minutes later, boom. But the real explosion was still to come. Within hours, Tesla's cybersecurity division had reconstructed the attacker's digital footprint. And that's when the name surfaced. Not the bombers, but the donor linked to their financial trail, a recurring contributor, ActBlue multiple campaigns. But one name stood out, Jasmine Crockett, Congresswoman, rising star, media darling. At first, no one wanted to say it aloud, but the numbers didn't lie. The attack had been funded, at least in part, by a donation connected to her campaign. And if that seemed like a stretch, it wouldn't for long, because this wasn't a fluke. This was a crack in the dam. The team ran deeper diagnostics. They pulled metadata from payment processors, bounced it against FEC filings, and what they found was the stuff of political nightmares. Hundreds, no, thousands of micro-donations funneled through digital proxies. Same names, same addresses, but the people behind those names? Dead, elderly, unaware, or entirely non-existent. One donor, James M., had sent 200 donations in a single hour. His listed address? A farmhouse in Kansas. The real James M., a 78-year-old veteran who didn't own a smartphone and used a rotary phone to this day. This guy donated $16,000 to climate change groups. Using a landline? One analyst asked. Another donor, flagged from Nebraska, had been dead since 2014, and yet these names were active, over and over, popping up across progressive campaigns like clockwork. The pipeline was simple, brilliant, and devastatingly effective. Scrape partial identity data from vulnerable sources' retirement homes, nursing records, graveyard archives, generate fake micro-donations through virtual prepaid cards, and funnel them through platforms like ActBlue. Every transaction under $20, just small enough to avoid triggering federal review. But taken together, it wasn't just corruption. It was industrial-scale financial identity theft, weaponized for political optics. And Crockett? Her campaign had received over $462,000 from accounts flagged for duplicate identity data, expired voter IDs, and yes, posthumous contributions. Still think this was a coincidence? Because Elon Musk didn't. He wasn't just investigating an explosion anymore, he was tracing the flame back to its source. And that trail didn't lead to an underground hacker cell or a rogue terrorist. It led straight to Capitol Hill, to a freshman Democrat with a stunningly flush campaign and a suspiciously fast rise to fame. But here's where it gets twisted. For months, the media had celebrated Crockett as a voice of authentic grassroots progressivism. Her campaign boasted thousands of small-dollar donors, proof of people-powered politics. Social media ate it up. MSNBC gave her prime time. Twitter trended her quotes. But now, every one of those little donations looked more like a fingerprint on a crime scene. And the platform powering it all, ActBlue, wasn't just facilitating political engagement. It was the digital laundromat of choice for invisible money. A system built without verification, without transparency, and apparently without conscience. By the time Elon Musk briefed his executive team, one phrase kept repeating in the room like a chant. No one wanted to admit was true. How many more campaigns are using dead donors? And more importantly, who's protecting them? It wasn't long before Musk made the decision, bring it to Congress. Make it public, light the match, and watch the rot burn under daylight. Because the moment his infrastructure was attacked, this stopped being business. It became personal. And when he walked into the House Oversight Committee a week later, the fire was no longer outside. It was in the room. And everyone knew this wasn't just a hearing, it was a reckoning. The truth wasn't coming. It had already arrived, and it brought spreadsheets. Because while Congress debated hashtags and headlines, Elon Musk was already steps ahead, staring into the void where accountability should have been. And if Jasmine Crockett thought the worst thing coming was a bad news cycle, she hadn't yet seen what happens when the richest man in the world brings receipts. And this was only the beginning. This wasn't just the beginning, it was the unraveling. Because when Elon Musk stepped out of that congressional hearing room, leaving a stunned chamber and a data bomb that no one could ignore, the question wasn't if the system was broken, it was how deep the break went. The target was no longer a single campaign, it was a machine. And at the heart of that machine, ActBlue. For years, ActBlue had been marketed as a simple fundraising tool, an open platform, empowering everyday Americans to donate a few bucks to candidates they believed in. It was the digital face of grassroots democracy, clean, simple, transparent, at least on the surface. But what Musk's engineers had uncovered wasn't grassroots, it wasn't clean. And it damn sure wasn't transparent. What they found was a back end so porous, so manipulable, that it made traditional money laundering look like a bake sale. Here's how it worked. You start with a name. Any name. A real person, ideally elderly or deceased. You don't need their social security number. Just enough identity, breadcrumbs, and address. Birth date, a voter record, maybe something leaked in a data breach from years ago. You feed that into a script. The script then generates hundreds of micro donations, $5 here, $10 here, spread across dozens of campaigns. Not enough to trigger federal scrutiny, but enough to simulate a digital army of donors. Now rinse and repeat, thousands of times. Using prepaid virtual cards tied to fake IP addresses and masked devices. The result? An invisible wave of money. And it always led back to the same place, ActBlue. Musk's team found donation records tied to people who had been dead for nearly a decade. Others were listed as donors multiple times per hour, from different locations, but all originating from the same server cluster hidden behind a spoofed DNS tunnel. One case was especially chilling. A woman in Nebraska, deceased since 2014, had, according to ActBlue's public data, donated 12 times to Jasmine Crockett's campaign in the past year. Her family had no idea. In fact, they found out when a reporter contacted them for comment. And that's when the real panic started. Because this wasn't just about Crockett anymore. It was about every campaign riding the illusion of massive public support. Every headline that screamed record-breaking grassroots fundraising. Every analyst who pointed to ActBlue numbers as evidence of the left's unstoppable momentum. What if it wasn't real? What if those millions of tiny donations weren't coming from voters, but from scripts? The dam burst wide open when Tesla's cybersecurity division ran their heat map overlay a live visualization of flagged donation anomalies across the country. The red zones lit up like a Christmas tree of fraud. Small towns, retirement communities, even funeral home databases had been exploited. One engineer, staring at the screen, said it out loud. This isn't a bug, it's a business model. And at the center of it all was a platform that claimed to empower voters but had quietly enabled one of the largest digital influence operations in modern political history. But here's what made it worse. ActBlue had no real identity verification. Anyone, anywhere, could donate under any name, no ID, no confirmation, no checks. Just an open field, a credit card box, and a green donate button. So when Crockett claimed, under oath, that she had no control over who donates, she was technically right, but strategically, it was the perfect shield, because with no guardrails in place, there was no accountability to demand. Except Musk wasn't playing their game. He wasn't interested in plausible deniability. He was chasing something bigger, the architecture of manipulation itself. And it wasn't long before the real ghosts started to surface. Reporters began receiving tips. A Kansas news station ran a segment, "Grandfather shocked by political donation, claims he's never heard of the candidate." The calls flooded in. That happened to my dad, too. "I haven't worked in years. How did I give $600 to justice reform?" By the end of the day, Twitter was trending a new phrase, "Dead Donors Club." It would have been funny if it wasn't so sinister. Because for every manipulated identity, there was a stolen voice. For every fake donation, a real person was silenced, turned into a political puppet without their knowledge or consent. And yet the mainstream media barely blinked. "No proof this is politically motivated," one outlet said. "Likely technical errors," said another. No mention of Tesla's findings. No mention of the email logs. No mention of the dead. But behind the scenes, in private message threads and encrypted group chats, strategists were panicking. Because if this broke wide open, if the public started questioning the entire foundation of progressive fundraising, the dominoes wouldn't just fall, they'd shatter. And Jasmine Crockett? She wasn't the first. She was just the one who got caught standing too close to the fire. As part 2 draws to a close, one thing is crystal clear. This isn't just a story about a faulty donation system. It's about a calculated deception, industrialized fraud hiding behind the language of activism, and a network that didn't just exploit, trust it, monetized it. And the deeper Musk's team digs, the more obvious it becomes. This wasn't a glitch in the system. This was the system. This was the system. That's what made it dangerous. That's what made it untouchable. Until Elon Musk touched it. By the time news outlets began cautiously reporting on irregular donation activity, Musk had already crossed the line. Most billionaires never even dared to approach. He didn't just call out the corruption, he dragged it, data first, into the heart of the American government. The congressional hearing wasn't announced with fireworks. It didn't need them. Because behind every closed-door briefing, every encrypted file transfer, and every pale-faced staffer whispering into an aide's ear was a quiet acknowledgement of something far bigger than Crockett. Something institutional, something systemic. But for now, all eyes were on her. Jasmine Crockett, first-term Congresswoman, progressive firebrand, regular face on MSNBC. And until very recently, a rising star with a grassroots war chest that made career politicians jealous, was about to sit 10 feet from the man who had just revealed the foundation of her campaign was funded by ghosts and smoke. 9 OM sharp. Room 2154 of the Rayburn House office building. Outside, the rain came in slow gray sheets, matching the mood like it had been scheduled by a Hollywood director. CNN on one side, Newsmax on the other. Fox News parked a broadcast van directly in front of NPR just to block their shot. Inside, the tension wasn't palpable. It was surgical. Every chair creaked like a question. Every whisper felt like a warning. And then, he walked in, Elon Musk. Black suit, no tie, zero expression. He nodded once to the chairman, said nothing, and took his seat like a man not preparing for battle but expecting resolution. As if the hearing was merely a formality, and the facts had already won. 2 minutes later, she entered. Crockett, dressed to command. Cobalt blue power suit. Heels sharp enough to draw blood. Her stride was rehearsed, her smile photogenic until she saw Musk. It was subtle, barely a twitch, but something in her posture faltered. "I didn't know he'd actually show," she whispered to her aide. "You should have guessed," the aide replied. They sat, 2 figures 10 feet apart, separated by ideology, data, and the scent of scorched credibility. At 9:02, the gavel dropped. Chairman Mark Green, Republican of Tennessee, cleared his throat. He didn't waste words. "This committee does not convene lightly," he began, "nor does it target individuals based on ideology. We are here to follow the money and the truth wherever they lead." And then, "Mr. Musk, you may begin." Musk leaned forward. No theatrics, no hesitation, just precision. "In the past 6 weeks," he said, "my legal and security teams have uncovered a coordinated, algorithmic pattern of donation fraud. We've identified thousands of falsified identities, manipulated payment methods, and false donors, many of whom are either deceased or have never made a political donation in their lives. He paused. Let the silence do the work. Then, these funds were funneled primarily through ActBlue and disproportionately into select campaigns, including, most notably, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett's. No gasp. Not yet. Just the sound of pens pausing, of staffers shifting in their seats. Crockett didn't blink. Congresswoman, Chairman Green said, do you have a response? She straightened, smile intact. Voice steady. Yes, Mr. Chairman. I want to be clear. I have never at any time encouraged, authorized, or facilitated illegal donations. My campaign complies with federal law, and these accusations reek of politically motivated overreach. Democrats on the panel nodded. Talking point secured. Hashtag ready. But Musk didn't even look at her. He looked at the data. Interesting, he said, because according to FEC records, your campaign has received over $462,000 from flagged accounts, duplicates, expired IDs, and at least 2 individuals listed as deceased since 2014. Now the silence got heavier. A Republican staffer coughed. A journalist in the back whispered, did he just say posthumous? The chairman banged the gavel. This hearing will remain in order. Musk clicked a remote. The screens lit up. Slide ONEA spreadsheet. Not names, dates, donation amounts. Status, deceased. 327 verified Republican voters. Many elderly. Many no longer living. All of them somehow donating to progressive causes through ActBlue, and repeatedly to Crockett's campaign. She inhaled. Sharply. These individuals, Musk continued, have no history of Democratic affiliation, no digital presence indicating political activity. Some are still using rotary phones. One, apparently, donated $16,000 while hospitalized. Slide 2. Transaction logs. One identity, $212 every 3 hours. Round the clock. Total, $14,960 in just 30 days. This isn't generosity, Musk said. It's forgery. Digital forgery masked as democracy. Then came slide 3. The image was grainy. A security still. A man placing the device at the Tesla supercharger in Virginia. Next to it, a redacted FEC donor profile. Same name, same address, same recurring donations linked directly. To Crockett for Congress. This time, the room gasped. Crockett's lips parted. Her voice came out like a blade. This is a gross misrepresentation. I don't control who donates under what name. That's how ActBlue works. Anyone can donate. You should be blaming the platform, not my campaign. Musk didn't raise his voice. You sent a thank you email, he replied, to the very man who torched my infrastructure. Personalized. Time-stamped. Verified. Silence. Chairman Green leaned forward. Congresswoman, are you saying your campaign had no safeguards in place despite hundreds of red flags? Crockett stiffened. We process hundreds of donations a day. We rely on trusted platforms. Musk turned. You mean the platform that allows anyone, anywhere, to donate under any name with zero verification? Her jaw tightened. If someone sent you a suitcase full of cash labeled Mr. X, nowhere, USA, Musk continued, would you deposit it blindly or ask a question first? She didn't answer. Couldn't. You either didn't know, he said, in which case you're incompetent, or you did, and you're complicit. That was the moment, the pivot, the shift. Because in that silence, thick, electric, dangerous, it wasn't just a political confrontation anymore. It was something larger, something irreversible. The hearing had changed. It was no longer about campaign finance. It was about exposure. And Musk had just pulled back the curtain. Elon Musk had pulled back the curtain. But what lay behind it wasn't just one corrupt campaign. It was an entire network, a system so intricately woven, so quietly sprawling, that it had functioned in plain sight for years, feeding off the illusion of small-dollar democracy. And now, that illusion was shattering. Because as the hearing room sat in stunned silence, the screen behind Musk flickered again, not with names this time, but with nodes, lines, and arrows connecting entities that had, until now, operated like shadows behind a spotlight. This isn't isolated, Musk said, stepping aside so the next presenter could approach. What you're about to see is the real engine behind the fraud. Enter Tesla's cybersecurity lead, not a politician. not a lawyer. A technician with the quiet demeanor of someone more comfortable crashing servers than speaking into microphones. He plugged in a drive. The chamber lights dimmed, and the screen came alive. A 3D model, sleek, chilling, unmistakably corporate, spun into view. At the center, a logo. Arabella Advisors. To most Americans, Arabella meant nothing. But to those who'd been watching campaign finance for years, it was the ghost in the machine. Technically a nonprofit, functionally a fog machine. The consulting giant that served as the heartbeat for hundreds of progressive front groups, funneling billions through a dizzying network of shell foundations. When you ask how small campaigns suddenly explode with funding, the technician said, "This is how." He pointed to the spiderweb of data, two shell corporations registered offshore, one in the Cayman Islands, one in Luxembourg, both linked to Arabella-affiliated entities. From there, funds were transferred in fragmented microgrants, tiny amounts spread across dozens of ActBlue accounts, each account tied to a fake donor. Each donor tied to someone real but unaware. And on the receiving end, dozens of progressive campaigns, but none more consistently enriched than Jasmine Crockett's. This isn't a trend, the text said. It's a circuit, a closed loop of deception designed not to be profitable, but to be undetectable. The chamber shifted. Journalists scribbled faster. Phones buzzed. Somewhere, a Democrat aide muttered into their sleeve, "How do you know this isn't coincidence?" One representative finally asked. Musk answered, calm, measured. Coincidence doesn't send $480,237.86 through a chain of virtual cards in 9 months without triggering a single fraud alert unless the system is built to allow it. That figure wasn't theoretical. It was precise. It was Crockett's haul through the flagged donations pipeline, and it was just the beginning, because then came the dagger. "We submitted a request," Musk said, "to access suspicious activity reports filed with the FEC during the previous administration. For years, they were buried." He looked directly at the chairman. "Now that they've surfaced, I'll let the data speak." Slide 4, a list of flagged financial entities. At the top, Arabella. Below that, ActBlue. And below that, preferred transfer targets, high-frequency recipients, Crockett for Congress Progressive Climate PAC, Justice Equity Alliance. Each flagged not once, but dozens of times. Repetitive patterns, fake donor clustering, high-velocity micro-transfers. A Republican staffer leaned over to whisper into the chairman's ear. The whisper turned into a nod. The nod turned into a directive. "Enter into evidence," Chairman Green said. "All of it." But the room wasn't done shifting, because just as the fifth slide was about to load, a staffer rushed forward, handed the chairman a USB drive. A single label, scrawled in block letters, "Verify first, then play." Green frowned, looked to legal counsel, then to Musk. "Is this yours?" "No," Musk said, "but I suggest you play it." Silence. The chamber held its breath. Green inserted the drive. The screen went black, then audio. A female voice. Sharp, clipped, familiar. "We need to clear the ActBlue logs. All of it. Scrub every connection before Monday, or we're toast. No edits, no distortion, no question." It was Jasmine Crockett. Gasps erupted. Phones flew from pockets. One reporter knocked over their chair. "This recording," the chairman said, voice low and slow, "has been authenticated by federal forensic protocol. It meets the standard for evidentiary submission." Crockett's face was frozen. Her posture collapsed. Her lawyer leaned in, whispered one word, "fifth." And just like that, the facade shattered. No deflection, no spin, no TikTok, ready comeback, just silence. The kind of silence that fills the void when a lie suffocates under its own weight. The committee didn't vote. They didn't need to. Effective immediately, Green said, "This committee is forwarding all attached materials to the Department of Justice for formal criminal review." And for the first time in the entire hearing, even the Democrats didn't object. Because what had started as a question about donations had become something else entirely: election tampering, data laundering, digital sabotage. And as the committee recessed, Crockett didn't storm out. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She just stood, slow, heavy, like the gravity of truth had finally landed. Outside, the news hit the feeds like a hurricane. Breaking: Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett suspended pending federal investigation. DOJ launches full audit of Act Blue's financial infrastructure. Arabella Advisors declines comment. Multiple shell orgs scrub websites. And inside the building, Musk didn't wait for applause. He just walked toward the door. One reporter shouted after him, "Do you feel vindicated?" He paused, half turned. "I don't invest in revenge," he said. "I invest in truth." Then he was gone. And somewhere in the DOJ, a new file had just been opened. No title, just 3 words, "Next on deck." That's how the DOJ labeled it. Not ongoing investigation, not case pending. Just 3 simple words, cold, efficient, and terrifying to anyone who knew what came next. Because this wasn't just the fall of Jasmine Crockett. It was the collapse of the illusion she represented. The illusion that progressive momentum was real, that small dollar donors were rising up in record numbers to fuel social justice campaigns, that democracy was being reborn online through clicks and credit cards. But in the harsh light of federal scrutiny, the truth looked very different, and it was uglier than anyone had imagined. Within 48 hours of the hearing, federal agents walked through the doors of Act Blue's Boston headquarters, armed with court orders, thermal printers, and forensic analysts. Servers were seized. Backups were cloned. Financial logs that had never seen sunlight were dragged into the open like roaches under a floodlight. Inside, stunned employees tried to play dumb. Executives scrambled to craft statements. "We are cooperating fully with investigators. These are isolated technical anomalies. We take donor integrity seriously." But it was too late, because the receipts were already out. What Musk's engineers had uncovered wasn't just a few dead people donating. It was an entire synthetic donor ecosystem, propped up by AI, scripts, and stolen identities. A shadow network, one that didn't need permission, one that had operated under the radar for years. And its centerpiece, Arabella, once known only in DC policy circles, now exposed as the single most frequent intermediary between foreign bank accounts, shell nonprofits, and progressive campaign surges. A nonprofit that had somehow become a power broker without a single elected official behind it. Arabella didn't appear in campaign ads. It didn't hold rallies. It didn't tweet. But its money did. And now that money was radioactive. A financial web connecting climate change coalitions, media watchdog groups, DEI initiatives, and perhaps most damning of all, vote mobilization nonprofits that had quietly ballooned in funding right before the 2020 and 2022 elections. Every transfer came with a timestamp. Every timestamp matched a donation spike. And in the corner of every file, one repeated tag, verified through Act Blue. It was systemic. It was scaled. It was invisible by design. By the 3rd day, banks began freezing related accounts. Multiple campaigns issued emergency statements. A handful of staffers at progressive PACs resigned quietly. The rest waited for subpoenas. And yet, amidst the political earthquake, Elon Musk never said another word. He didn't post a thread, didn't hold a press conference, didn't appear on Tucker or Rogan or CNN. He simply logged into X, formerly Twitter, and posted, "Truth doesn't need applause." 10,000 retweets in an hour. 1 million by nightfall. Meme pages turned that single line into digital gospel. One image showed Musk holding a USB drive above a burning campaign office. Another had Crockett's face, pasted onto a dollar bill, marked void. But behind the memes, the real damage was taking shape. The Oversight Committee released a formal statement, backed by bipartisan sign-off. It used language not seen since Watergate. "We have identified credible evidence of systemic financial fraud, enabled by digital platforms and executed through networks of political shell organizations. This matter is now in the jurisdiction of the Department of Justice and appropriate criminal divisions." The term Act Blue began trending on political forums, not as a platform, but as a verb. She got Act Blued. Don't get caught in the Act Blue loop. Is this campaign legit or Act Blue funded? It became slang for being exposed, for having your house of cards blown down by cold, hard data. And then came the letter, signed, sealed, and read live on air by a Fox News anchor who couldn't hide his grin. From the office of President Donald J. Trump, in recognition of his service to the American taxpayer, the defense of factual transparency, and his unrelenting pursuit of truth, I extend my highest appreciation to Mr. Elon Musk and the members of the House Oversight Committee. May this be the first domino to fall. The message was clear. This wasn't the end of a scandal. It was the start of a purge. Because if Jasmine Crockett could fall this fast, this hard, and this publicly with this much evidence, how many others were just one spreadsheet away from collapse? By the following Monday, whistleblowers began surfacing, quietly, carefully. Former back-end engineers, payment compliance officers, even one ex-ActBlue staffer, whose name was kept redacted for their safety. Each one echoed the same thing. We knew. But we were told to keep it running. Don't ask too many questions. The FBI opened a separate unit to investigate financial identity theft through nonprofit platforms. The FEC held an emergency session to review campaign contribution laws in the age of synthetic donors. A Senate committee requested formal hearings. And across America, a bitter realization settled in. They hadn't been donating to causes. They had been used as cover for operations. Every $5 donation made in good faith, a disguise. Every receipt, a smokescreen. Every headline that read, "Progressive fundraising surges again," now suspect. And in the middle of it all, no longer just a tech mogul, no longer just a disruptor, stood Elon Musk. Not as a politician, not as a candidate, but as the man who set fire to the fog. And in his wake, the game had changed. Because if money is speech, then what ActBlue did wasn't just fraud. It was voice theft. And the people weren't just broke. They had been hijacked.